Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nur Atirah binti Sallehudin, and today my group and I will explain regarding corporate governance and how it will affect Hongwei Holdings Berhad. Without further ado, let's start. When we talk about corporate governance is the system of rules, practices and procedure by which a firm is directed and controlled. A company to have a good corporate governance in accordance to eminent practices when it requires vision, processes and structure to strive for long-term sustainability. Also, it needs good corporate citizenship, which is commitment to ethical behavior in business strategy, operations and culture. In this globalized era, creditors and other stockholders are steadily focusing on considerations of environmental, social and governance as an intrinsic value of company's performance and also for the sustainability of the company. Moreover, the board of directors need to understand and incorporate in their core decision making to ensure that the companies are operating efficiently and it sustain growth. Also, the boards clearly understand their roles and responsibility and understand that the key principles of corporate governance, such as effective control, corporate culture grounded in ethical behavior and transparency, which it can reduce risk, corruption and mismanagement of the company. A company that have bad corporate governance practices usually faces with such as fraud, corruption, negligence and also lack of accountability. Poor corporate governance shows company how have inability to manage the business properly lead to the failure of the mismanagement. Firstly, board of directors that lack the knowledge to make informed decision as BODs play an important role in the corporate governance. If the lack of the information for them to make the decision, it might interrupt them in making the decision for the best interest of the company. And second, lack of financial resources. When the company is in bad shape, it will be hard for it to increase capital or equity of the company because the potential investor or creditor might have in doubt with the company whether they can pay them back. And third, promotion of the nepotism, corruption and incompetent leadership. There will be such cases such as favoritism or bias treatment towards the company within the organisation, which it will lead to the corruption in the management. Something happened, it will only show that an incompetent leadership of every team within the organisation. Fourth, ignorance toward financial result by financial analysts and regulators, as every company have their own financial analysts, auditors and regulators. They might ignore the recommendation from them in order to improve their business. And fifth, inadequately qualified member who do not have appropriate qualification or experience to analyze key business transaction. There is also a company who unable to hire members to perform their duties and responsibility properly and get to manage the operations of the company, as it will not going smoothly as what it wants to be. Lastly, board controlled by one individual who frequently disregard expert advice. The board who controlled by one individual will only create self-interest trait, BODs who might deny expert advice. Even though it has been warned so many times, it will only bring the company downwards.
Hello everyone, I'm Amira and I'll be explaining to you on the effects of good and bad corporate governance. So let's start with the good ones. The first effect is it builds morale, reputation and legacy for the company. So implementing good corporate governance will enhance the company's identity towards stakeholder and potential investors. Next, it increases the success rate of financial performance and enhances sustainability. So company with good governance will be able to quickly identify issues and solve the issues as soon as possible. Thus, it reduces cost to bear and increase the efficiency. So next, it can create more opportunities to gain competitive advantages. So good corporate governance can eventually make the organizations more sustainable and adaptable to change. And the fourth one is it provides a practical way to guide decision making at all levels. It means that the company will have the ability to make informed decisions which will quickly improve performance and reduce the effects of potential failures. Okay, now let's move on to the effect of bad corporate governance. Here we have 5 points, and the first one is loss of shareholders' confidence and trust. So when a company deviates from its corporate governance strategy, it sends a signal to its shareholders that it cannot be trusted. So if the shareholders believe bad business decisions are in the company's immediate future, they may jump ship to avoid any potential loss. So secondly, implementing bad corporate governance will cause difficulty in raising capital. Lack of adherence to a company's corporate governance strategies can also scare away investors. Therefore, it will be hard for the company to raise capital in order to maintain their business. So thirdly, the no risk management. Companies that does not follow good corporate governance may lead to lack of risk management within its business. Consequently, it will increase the possibility of the company making bad investments and decisions. So the fourth one is increase government oversight. So a company with bad corporate governance strategies may incur increased government oversight in order to verify that the company is operating within the bound of the law. So this puts the business in the spotlight if anything was to ever go wrong. So lastly, it can lead to bad business decision, which can lower the overall value of the company and make it more difficult for the business to meet its financial obligations.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nur Aqilah binti Mohamed Nasir, and today I will continue on presenting the points of discussion. First, we take a look at the principle A, board leadership and effectiveness. Under this principle, every company must be led by a board which assumes the responsibility for the company's leadership and also meeting the objectives and goals of the company. So under this practice, the chairman is the one who is responsible for instilling good corporate governance in their own company. What are the problems in this case study? Gary Menon, the executive chairman of Hongwei, have ordered Jasmine Kaur, the CEO, to solve all the problems in Hongwei, or else she should leave the company. Therefore, Jasmine thinks that Gary's order is a huge burden to her. So what are the strategies for these problems? To overcome this, Gary as the chairman should lead the board meetings and discussions to ensure that appropriate steps are taken to solve all the problems in Hongwei. So what are the impact if they apply this strategy? The impact is that the board will be required to participate in the meeting led by the chairman, and they can discuss regarding the issue arise and also might meet the deadline to submit the annual report in the agreed time. In addition, Jasmine would not think that solving the problems alone in company is a burden to her because Gary also exercised his responsibility as the chairman of Hongwei. Next, under the same principle, in terms of the practice, the board is supported by a suitably qualified and competent company secretary to provide a sound governance advice and ensure adherence to rules and procedures. So what are the problems? The problem is that Hongwei did not have a competent secretary to provide an advice to the board. Therefore, Jasmine was fined for causing Hongwei to commit an unlawful act. So the example is the corporate governance breaches. If Hongwei has a capable secretary to advise the board, these kind of problems could be avoided from happening. So what are the strategies? The strategies is to ensure that the secretary are aware of what are their roles and responsibilities in the company. Therefore, the impact for this strategy is that there will be a low chances of unlawful act to happen in Hongwei. Because of what? Because of the secretary can provide a sound governance advice to the board. Thus, Jasmine will not get fined for any illegal act because the secretary has executed their responsibility in Hongwei.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Amirah Syafiqah binti Awalludin, and I'll be continuing our presentation with the third point of discussion under Principle A, Board Leadership and Effectiveness. So, referring to the Malaysian Code of Corporate Governance 2021, board composition influences the ability of the board to fulfill its oversight responsibilities. So, according to the principle, an effective board should include the right group of people with an appropriate mix of skills, knowledge, experience, and independent elements that fit the company's objectives and strategic goals. So So the problem with Hongwei Holdings Berhad is that the company was left without a proper functioning board, with all non-executive directors and the chief financial officer resigning without prior notice, leaving only Gary Menon and Jasmine Carr as the board. So even with the newly appointed directors, they had not been able to establish control over the operations of the group since their appointment, and as such were acting without functioning organization. So if the companies were to implement strategies as suggested by the principal, appointment of the board and senior management should be based on objective criteria merit with due regard for diversity in skills, experience, age, cultural background, and gender. The nomination committee should ensure that the composition of the board is refreshed periodically. The tenure of each director should be reviewed by the nomination committee, and annual re-election of a director should be contingent on satisfactory evaluation of the director's performance and contribution to the board. Therefore, the impact if Hongwei Holdings Berhad were to implement the strategies as followed in the Malaysian Code of Corporate Governance, the directors appointed would be able to devote the required time to serve the board effectively and not make a sudden resignation without prior notice. Next, there will be no doubt on the integrity and governance of the company, as every director are reviewed by the nomination committee. And lastly, the responsibility of each functioning organization will also be well attended with proper and excellent leadership from the directors.
Hi, my name is Nur Nadhirah binti Mohamed Nasir, and I will continue to explain in regards to the points of discussion. I will focus on Principle B of MCCG 2021, Effective Audit and Risk Management. According to MCCG 2021, an effective audit committee can bring transparency, focus, and independent judgment needed to oversee the financial reporting process. So, in practice, the audit committee should appropriately communicate its insights, views, and concerns about relevant transactions and events to external and internal auditors, and the audit committee should be fully informed about significant matters related to the company's audit and its financial statements, and addresses these matters. The problem in Hongwei's case is the auditor was unable to contact the management of the subsidiaries, and there was no commitment given by the management of the subsidiaries. Therefore, the auditor is not able to complete the audit report because they could not determine whether all significant events occurring after the reporting period had been adequately dealt with respect to disclosures, presentation, and the assessment. Thus, it is suggested that the corporate governance in Hongwei Holdings Berhad subsidiaries should give commitment and provide evidence to ascertain whether the group still had ownership over the inventories. So, in Company Acts 2016, Section 266, subsection 4 stated clearly about the auditor's right, which auditor can access at all reasonable time and get any information related to the accounting and all companies' record. If Hongwei Berhad subsidiaries are willing to follow the suggestion, auditors can complete the report as they already can determine all significant events occurring after the reporting period. In addition, the auditors can solve the problems on the ownership and recoverable amount of the subsidiaries and the risk that fraud occurs because the financial statement may be misstated by the team management of subsidiaries, and weak internal control can also be avoided.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Puteri Amalia binti Shahrulnizam, and I will continue this presentation with the next point of discussion. We will be looking at Principle C, which is integrity in corporate reporting and meaningful relationship with stakeholders. Under this principle, continuous engagement and communication with stakeholders build trust and understanding between the company and stakeholders. In terms of practices, the board should ensure effective, transparent communication with stakeholders. The problem arises when there were legal claims that appeared to have been brought by certain parties against Jinjiang Shoe Material Limited, who is the main subsidiary of Hongwei Holdings Berhad. However, the claims were unsure due to incomplete information provided. Not only that, Gary Menon and Jasmine Kaur also had failed to communicate with regulators or new board in Malaysia. Therefore, fine of 1,600,000 ringgit each was imposed to them according to Bursa's enforcement action. To overcome these problems, ongoing communication between Hongwei Holdings Berhad and stakeholders is a must to facilitate mutual understanding of each other's objectives and expectations. How can the suggested strategy give impact? By doing as mentioned, the chance for Hongwei Holdings Berhad to be charged with these legal claims would be very, very low, as they could have been advised earlier about the possible risk. Besides that, proper communication regarding their issues could have avoided Gary and Jasmine from being fined. We have provided more suggestions to improve the corporate governance of the company. Firstly, division of responsibilities among different authorities in the corporate governance should be clearly articulated. Secondly, creating a working governance infrastructure which actually needs to be working downwards with a clear line of responsibility running from the board to management. Thirdly, senior management must provide timely information to ensure proper board supervision. And lastly, board must be willingly to examine their own strengths and weaknesses, as the evaluation process should be used to identify weaknesses in the board performance. As the conclusion, we all know that Hongwei Holdings Berhad does not comply with the Malaysian Code of Corporate Governance as discussed in the previous points of discussion. Therefore, by using our suggested strategies, the company would be able to improve corporate governance in the first place. Ineffective corporate governance will affect shareholders' confidence. A company with poor corporate governance strategy can have negative influence on the business market. That is all from me. Thank you.